from USA Today, George Schroeder, the college football writer, one of the premier college football writers in the country, and certainly with USA Today. And I saw him. He was in Arlington with the Big 12 football media days, and of course, he's probably made some others. What other media days did you get to enjoy, George? And good morning.
Yeah, enjoy is an interesting term, but good morning to you. I do enjoy them, actually. I'm kidding, but the only other one I went to this year was Pac-12 last week in Los Angeles, which is 12 teams crammed into one day, so it's kind of a big whirlwind, and then it takes you a couple of days to decompress and figure out what you actually heard. But that's the only other one I went to this year, but I am really looking forward to the college football season, which obviously, we're almost to August, so here we go.
And let me ask you, because I had a couple of questions from the Great Northwest on my list selfishly, because folks, George, after working at the Oklahoman, covering the University of Oklahoma primarily, he moved on up to the Great Northwest and worked in Eugene, Oregon, and covered the the Oregon Ducks. And Oklahoma State opens in on Friday, August 30th, in Corvallis, nearby, against their rival in the Pac-12, Oregon State. But we find out that Corvallis really doesn't have a hotel to house visiting teams, so Oklahoma State will fly in. We will stay in Eugene the night before. I'm actually going out one day early, so I'll be in Eugene for a couple of days. And George, what you lived up there, and I know you loved it. And it's
Yeah.
beautiful. I've never been there, but I've got an extra day in Eugene. What do I need to see?
Well, there's tons. Listen, so Eugene itself is a nice place, but it's the sites around Eugene and Corvallis that are really cool, because they both sit in this really pretty but very flat valley, the Willamette Valley. They're 45 minutes apart, so they're obviously a lot closer than, say, OSU and OU are. And but to the west is the coastal mountain range, and then the Pacific coast. And it's not like the sand that we know if we go down to the Gulf. It's rocks and cliffs and lighthouses and sea lions, and it's just fantastic. And that is worth your time. You could drive out from Eugene, and in an hour and 15 minutes be on the coast. And if you drive north 15 or 20 miles, you'll go through tunnels, and you'll be on cliffs, and there'll be lighthouses, and it's just fantastic. It's worth anybody's time who has time to do it. You can also do that from Corvallis, anybody who's going to be, actually staying in Corvallis. There are a couple of decent hotels, just not really full service for teams, or the one full service for the team is the one that the Beavers are probably staying at. But so you could do that. What I like to do was to go east from Eugene. If you go east about the same time, an hour and a half, you're in the middle of you're in the passes between 10,000-foot peaks, the Three Sisters of the Cascade Range, and it is just flat and beautiful. It's just, flat's the wrong word, obviously, but it's unbelievably beautiful up there, especially this time of year. The other thing I would say is the climate is going to be unbelievably nice on that Friday night at the end of August. During the day it's going to be 80 with no humidity, and during the night, pack a fleece, because it's going to get down into the 50s. It's summertime in the in that part of Oregon is as great as anywhere in the country. It's nothing like it. It's spectacular. So I would just suggest that you drive. You decide you're going to take a drive, and when you get serious about where you want to go, I can help you.
Well, and nearby, and I don't know how many of the buildings are still exist. I hear there's some plaques, but we're of the Animal House generation, and that was filmed right there on Eugene, so at the University of Oregon. So
Yeah,
that's kind of
and the Oregon
cool as
campus
well.
is pretty. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Robert. The Oregon campus is pretty, and the place where the horse was in the president's office is literally the president's office at Johnson Hall, which is the old administration building they still use. So that's right. And then just if you'll go 10, 15 minutes south on Interstate 5 from Eugene, Cottage Grove, Oregon is a cute little town, and they used Cottage Grove's Main Street for that famous final scene where the marching band ends up marching into the wall, down an alley and into a wall. That was Cottage Grove. So I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff. There's no question about that. I mean, it is a fantastic place for those Cowboy fans who are able to make the jaunt. My guess is most of them will be in Portland, and stay in Portland, which is a whole different kind of world. It's a fantastic urban environment. But if you have the opportunity to hang out in Corvallis or Eugene or both, then please take advantage of the natural beauty to either the east or the west. It's fantastic. And the other thing I would say to you, Robert, is you'll obviously be on the team bus, which is too bad because
actually no, we're bumped, George. We're bumped on this one. It's a Regents trip, and
okay.
Also I guess the Eugene Airport. Yeah, the Eugene Airport is having some work done, and so they, from what I've been told, they've told Oklahoma State we can land your 737-800, but not a full load, which fit what Mike Gundy wanted to do anyway, because he wanted to eliminate and have some other people go commercial and space it out where every other seat was empty and the players had more space on the plane. So
Gotcha.
I think that's the way they're going to go. But no, actually, that's why I'm going a day early. I got great United Airlines, great situation.
Oh, yeah.
I get back home Saturday by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which is a priority for me. But I get an extra day out there. So I'm from what you said, I'm thinking I'm getting in the rental car, and I love seascapes. So I'm probably gonna head west.
Well, and do that, and you will not be so you'll end up going straight out and you'll hit Florence, Oregon, and then just drive. My suggestion would be drive north on Highway 101, US 101, and go up. There's a lighthouse called Heceta Head Lighthouse. At least go up to that and kind of kick around. You're going to cross over this crazy cool through a tunnel and then over a bridge immediately, and then you peel off, and there you are at the lighthouse. But then after you've seen the lighthouse, go north another 15 miles until you decide to turn around. It is terrific. And the sights are worth even getting out, and walking down. They've got great overlooks. They've got great places where you can park and just kind of wander out and see the sea, crashing up against these giant rocks. It's cool. So you're really going to enjoy it. And what I was going to say about if you're not on the team bus is, so Friday when you go to Corvallis, take US 99. Don't go back up I-5. Don't go up I-5. Take US 99, the US highway. And that's the highway that the airport is on, so you'll be at least a little familiar with it. Take US 99. It's a great two-lane road that's not choked with traffic, and it will be a fantastic drive through that flat, beautiful valley.
And I think from what I talked with Mac Butler, that's the way the team bus plans on going. Not
sure,
on
it
the
will
interstate,
be. It makes all the sense in the world. But if you've never been there, you might go, "Oh, I'll take the interstate. It'll cut some time off." Well, it probably won't cut any time off, and it definitely won't be picturesque. As picturesque as if you just take this fantastic U.S. highway that connects the two cities.
All right. Yeah, we have not talked any college football. We have talked.
How about that?
But you know what? For Oklahoma State fans, and from what I understand, there is a good number of Oklahoma State fans. That's why I'm leaving on Wednesday instead of Thursday. Most of the flights on Thursday are booked, and people are planning on staying over the weekend in Oregon.
Yeah.
I need to get back because I want to be back and getting ready for the next week, and also watching some college football. I'm going to guess you may have the OU Houston assignment on Sunday night, because I think that's going to be a huge game.
Well, I'm going to Oregon Auburn at Jerry World in Arlington, where I saw you last at AT&T Stadium on Saturday. So I'll be there. And then the only reason I'll actually be at OU Houston is because obviously I live in the area and it's on Sunday night. And so it makes sense to just drive home and cover that game. So I'll do that. And those are the two games I'll be at that weekend. But obviously I'll be watching the Cowboys. They're going to beat the Beavers. All right. That's a bad team. Jonathan Smith's done a nice job, but they're at the bottom of the Pac-12 North, and that's a tough division to be at the bottom of. I'll watch that game, and then I'm going to watch whatever else I can find on Saturday. It's not as great of an opening weekend, really, for those marquee matchups as we've seen in the past. But I'll watch that, and then obviously Oklahoma has that window on Sunday night all to itself, and then I've now forgotten the Monday night game. It's who is it? Somebody versus Louisville, I want to say.
Yeah, I think is it Florida State?
It might be, and I'll be interested. I think that is right, and I'll be interested to see Florida State because of how terrible they were a year ago, and what's it going to be like for Willie Taggart now?
My rant this preseason has been the scheduling. I mean, I would like to see Bill Hancock and the folks involved with the committee and the college football playoff exert a little pressure, and I understand they'd be putting pressure on one of the most powerful conference commissioners that's out there when you talk about the SEC, but it started to bug me even more now that the SEC and the ACC only play 8 conference games. I think it's a big disadvantage for the Big 10, Big 12, and Pac 12 to play the 9, even at Kansas. And that's my example. Kansas and Texas played last year at the end of the regular season. Texas playing to get into that game with Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship, and they were life or death. That was a one touchdown game in Lawrence, Kansas. So conference games to me are always going to be more difficult unless you've got just two blue bloods going at it in a non-conference game. It's time for everybody to play the same number of conference games.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And look, but one thing we're a little guilty of is always looking at this only from the perspective of the playoff. And if we do that, then you have to keep in mind that the 8-game conference schedule, and I'll just stick with the SEC, has worked for the SEC in terms of the playoff, yes, because it's one fewer game that could get you in the grind of the season. But it's also worked out well for those teams on the other end of the standings, the bad end of the standings in the SEC, because typically that means it's 4 non-conference games, which you usually win all 4 of them, the way they're scheduled a lot of times, and that puts you only 2 away from getting to a bowl. And so it works for them on both ends, right? On the top end with aspirations for the playoff, and on the bottom end with just we need to get to a bowl game to keep things going here. And that's one of the reasons they've done it. I do think there's some pressures that are going to change all of it, though. And it's mostly because even in the SEC, attendance pressures are becoming very, very real. People do not want to go see Alabama play Western Carolina. People don't want to go see those games. And so if you just have a 9th conference game, it helps you for TV inventory too, by the way, but it helps you maybe put butts in the seats a little better. The other thing I would say, Robert, is one more conference game is better for conference cohesion. That's a 14-team conference, and I know that we're used to seeing, because of the 9-game schedule with only 10 teams, everybody in the Big 12 play everybody. In the SEC, because they only play 8 games and because they have 14 teams, you play the other 6 teams in your division every year, and then you play 2 teams from the other division. But it's even dumber than that, because they play one of those teams from the other division every year. You have a permanent crossover rival. I know you know this, but maybe some of your listeners don't. So Alabama's permanent crossover rival is Tennessee, which sounds great, but Tennessee's been terrible forever. But what it also does is it means that they have one more game every year against somebody else from the other division, the SEC East. And that means that they play one of those 7 teams every year, and then they rotate through the other 6 teams. You play them once every 6 years, twice every 12 years. So Alabama and Georgia meet in the regular season 2 times every 12 years. That Alabama and Florida meet 2 times every 12 years. Auburn and Florida meet 2 times every 12 years. Now, Auburn and Georgia, they meet every year because it's the permanent crossover rival. So not only do they only have 8 games, but they don't even see, you miss a bunch of teams. That's why when the Big 12 sort of uses its talking points about how our conference champion is determined by who we play, not who we don't play, not by who we miss. That's kind of what they're taking aim at. And I would just tell you this, never mind the playoff, never mind bowl eligibility, just for the sake of cohesiveness in your conference and promoting sort of it being a conference, I think the SEC should go to 9. because that's at least one. They'll probably keep the permanent crossover thing, but that's at least two teams that you play every year, two more teams you play every year rather than one. So I think they will. And look, I know you asked a short question, and I gave you a really long answer and went down a rabbit trail, but that is one of the burrs under my saddle too, is that they only play 8 games. And these other leagues are exposing half their league. Half their league takes one more loss, which changes the perception of a league too. That changes the perception of a league. If Oklahoma State is really good and is in the mix for the playoff, and they're 12-1, and they're being matched up against some SEC team that's 12-1, but they start talking about the strength of schedule and things like that. Well, the Oklahoma State opponents, don't have quite the same SOSs, the same records, because they all, half of them took another loss because they play more games. Whereas in the SEC, that bumps everybody's record up 1 game. Does that make sense? That's true with the Pac-12 and the Big Ten teams too. They all take half of their league takes one more loss, which affects the strength of schedule and the records, which affects the perception of how strong the league is.
No, it makes perfect sense, and George Schroeder with us from USA Today, one of the top college football writers in the country, and also one of the leaders amongst the Football Writers Association of America. You're a past president, aren't you?
Yeah, I am, but that just qualifies me to say I'm a past president. I don't get anything for that. So.
You get to go to that past president's dinner at the convention?
No, that's actually true. The past president's dinner every year is really a highlight of my year. Get to see a lot of colleagues, and it's a nice dinner, so I appreciate that. Yeah, that's true. Yes, I am a past president.
Okay, well, I'm just paying homage to the potentate here. So, all right,
Whatever.
and I a couple of things, and I know we've gone past, but Nick Saban at least put his money where his mouth is. I thought that was refreshing to see Alabama's schedule, not a special game in a neutral venue, but to schedule a home and home where the Crimson Tide will actually go play on somebody else's campus that's a worthy non-conference opponent. Yeah.
I'm of two minds with Nick Saban. First of all, he has consistently been a guy who has pushed for 9 conference games, a 9-game conference schedule for the SEC consistently. He's the first guy to do it. Gus Malzahn, his rival, joined him in that a year or so ago, and they're the only guys that have come out publicly for that. The rest of them are pretty content with the 8-game schedule because it helps them out a lot. So he said that, and not only has he said that, he's also been a proponent that SEC teams should have to play 10 Power 5 opponents. And he would also be happy if they set it up to where Power 5 opponents only played Power 5 opponents, which obviously takes you beyond the SEC, but sort of everybody agreeing to do that. I don't think we're anywhere close to that happening, but he's consistently been on that bandwagon, so I give him credit for that. He has only, in the last couple of years, come around to the idea that you need to play home and home. For a long time, Alabama has been the master of scheduling these neutral site games against name teams who happen to be sort of down and not really done it at home, and it's worked out to their benefit, or not done home and homes, which means they don't go on the road, and that's worked out to their benefit. But for whatever reason, he's come around to this idea. They've got Texas on the schedule here coming up. You're right about Wisconsin. They've got a bunch of nice matchups set up, and credit to Nick Saban. A lot of people like to get on him for a lot of different reasons. And he clearly has Alabama's best interest at heart first, which I think he should. But he's also kind of become a voice inside that conference and nationally for the idea that you need to schedule up. And so I appreciate that about it.
And last question, and I know I said we were going to keep this general college football, and I still think I'm doing that. You were at the Big 12 football media days. I thought it was, because I've gotten to the point where I think less and less that the time investment and monetary investment of going is not worth the value that you get, in content while you're there. and this one changed my mind. I think maybe the influx of the four new coaches that
Yeah,
may have been part of it. I think we saw coaches, and I know a lot of guys came up to me because they know I cover, Mike in Oklahoma State, and they said, "Wow, were you surprised that Gundy was as forthright as he was, and he fell on his sword?" And I said, "Well, he fell on his sword back in the spring. Those of us
right.
that were around, we had that story in the spring, and he stayed consistent with it. And this is the first time he's really, said these things in front of a national group of media. But I do
But
think that the Big 12 media days were a little more forthcoming, a little more content than we normally have had. And I was just going to check with you after
yeah,
being there and digesting all that. Did it change your views? You have any different opinions of the Big 12 that you than the ones you had going into Arlington?
I don't think I have any different opinions of the Big 12, and I can get in that in a second. I'll tell you this: I look at media days in terms of the access you get, first of all, and then what the guys say is a different thing entirely, and that's what you're talking about. But in terms of access, the Big 12 has been as good as anybody. Now, the Pac-12 is really good. I can walk up and talk to anybody I want to, but as I mentioned earlier, it's 12 teams crammed into one day, which makes it kind of a whirlwind. But the Big 12, you've got the time to be able to get the questions you need in to the guys you want to talk to for the stories you want to do. And so as a reporter, I appreciate that. That's not the case, for example, at the SEC. First of all, in terms of time, but secondly, just in terms of the number of people they credential as media, it makes it so, and many of whom are not, the kinds of media that we would go, that's real, makes it harder to do. But I think the Big 12 and the Big 10 and to a lesser extent the Pac-12 do a really nice job of giving you the time. ACC is pretty good too, to give you the time and the access you need. But what you're talking about is people actually saying stuff of substance, I think. And I actually thought it was different this year. And I
Yes.
do think it had to do with the new coaches and the quality that they seem to be, right? I mean, we all know about Les, and we knew he would be entertaining one way or the other, whatever that means, whether he's unintentionally funny or just being quirky Les. But I thought, for example, Matt Wells, who I've known for a long, long time, I knew he would be impressive. What was amazing was Matt Wells, the new Texas Tech coach, and obviously he's from Sallisaw, was how many people came up to me or you just sort of heard through the building how impressive he was. And he's saying substantive things. Neil Brown is the guy that I got to know just a little bit when he was at Troy, and he is impressive when you talk with him. And then I think a guy most of us didn't know at all, Chris Kleiman, he comes across really well too. So I thought those four guys were good. The only other thing I thought was this: I don't think my perception of the Big 12 changed, Robert, but I would say this: I came away from those 2 days thinking the Big 12 is in a way different place than it has been. It's a very confident feeling league. Now that kind of thing can get shaken, if its champion emerges at 10-3 and doesn't get into the playoff, right? But it feels like that the Big 12 is more confident about what it is and its current situation and its future, stability than it's been in a long time, really, for this whole decade. And that's a good place to be. And I just felt like that was the vibe I got, which if you're a Big 12 fan, and obviously I guess almost all of your listeners are, that's a good place to be. And it should make you feel good about where OSU sits and what OSU's future is in sort of the bigger college football landscape. And so I actually thought it was really good. I also think this: I think it's going to be a very good, very deep league that might eat its own this year. And I don't know if that's good for the league. It might be fun for OSU fans because that might mean that neither OU nor Texas get into the playoff. But somehow it's good when the league gets into the playoff, even when it's a team you don't like. It's actually good for the league.
No, and I understand that, and I think I'm not going to say a lot of our fans do because when I say, hey, it's important for Oklahoma to beat Houston in that first game and it's important for it'd be important for Texas to beat LSU. I'm assuming you might have that game.
Yeah, I don't know yet for week 2, but I sure hope
Okay.
so. And It's
Yeah.
funny because I spoke in front of an audience that was mostly OU fans last night, and one of them before I started basically said, "I hope Texas loses every game it plays." I'm like, "Look, Texas being good is good for you guys. You don't want them to be too good, right? And if you're an OSU fan, you don't want them to be too good because you want to occupy that spot. But when Texas is good, that's better for the league. Just it's a hard thing because it's like it comes at somebody's expense, right? So maybe the best thing is if Texas and Oklahoma each take one loss and it's to OSU. I think OSU fans would be okay with that, especially if OSU doesn't lose any. But it's a hard thing to sort of think bigger than the fan base, and I get it that people don't do that, and maybe never will do that. I mean, think about Alabama and Auburn fans. Could they ever come to that idea? And the answer is no. So I'm okay with that. I don't have a fan affiliation here, and so I'm just like, look, for the Big 12, it's not a bad thing to be in the playoff. It's a really, really good thing, regardless of which team it is.
Yeah, and along those lines, and I that's the one I'm worried about. I'm worried about how good Texas will be. I'm not just totally confident yet. And from an Oklahoma State standpoint,
Yeah.
that's the conference opener in Austin. And when you look at that, Oklahoma State's got a chance to beat Texas in Austin for the sixth straight time. Fifth was no one had ever done that. No one's ever gone to Austin and won 5 times in a row on the road against Texas.
That
Oklahoma
is
doesn't
an
even have a
amazing,
chance because,
right.
yeah. So,
Look, it's
yeah,
already an amazing stat and an amazing streak, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it, but
oh
just,
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. Listen, I can't wait to see what unfolds in Stillwater. Let me just tell you this, because we are all talking about Oklahoma and Texas, Texas and Oklahoma. Wow, look at Iowa State. And then, Gary Patterson won't have another bad year. That's sort of where all the attention lies. And meanwhile, it's pretty clear that, and I don't know if this is warranted or not, and I guess we'll find out. It's pretty clear that Mike Gundy has turned the corner and feels more confident, it seems like, about his team than he did last year. And you can kind of sometimes read Mike by his demeanor, and it is decidedly upbeat and different. I mean, and you're around them a lot more than I am, obviously, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was just sort of the vibe I got. Sometimes you're trying to project that, right? But sometimes there's a bit of reality going on there too.
I think he feels good, and I think he's excited because this team needs some development. It needs to come together, and I think he feels he's got the components to make it come together. We got to get out. I'm pressed against a break, and it's always with you, George. I can go on, and especially love the travel info early on. That'll help our fans too. So
let's talk more. In the middle of August if you want, and we can do like a travelogue show if you want to do it.
There you go, because it's I've never been to Oregon, been to Washington, and I'm looking forward to it. So hey, appreciate all that, and enjoy the early parts of report and all that stuff, and we'll catch back up with you.
Thank you.
All right, George Schroeder from USA Today.